Before we start this little episode, let me just say that this is not an episode about bashing Israel. It's an episode about Chat GPT being biased, and I use the Israel-Palestine conflict to make that point. Why Israel? Because the topic of the Israel-Palestine conflict is sensitive and controversial, and because, as is the case with Wikipedia, there seem to be mechanisms in place that ensure the preferential distribution of a certain point of view. I will leave it up to you to judge what point of view that is, other than a clear bias in one direction. The context for this little experiment were some recent interviews I had with subject matter experts on the topic of the Israel-Palestine conflict, such as Noam Chomsky, Benny Morris and Gideon Levy, all of which you can find on my YouTube channel. As for myself, I'm a behavior analyst by training, and my academic research focused on deceptions in high-stakes business negotiations. To be more specific, I investigated the linguistic deception markers that senior executives of one of the world's largest corporations use to omit giving critical information. That's why I'm interested in ChatGPT as a language model, because it has to apply the same strategies a real person would when it manipulates information. But before we now move over to the ChatGPT interface, let me just reiterate once more, this episode is about ChatGPT being biased and not necessarily about Israel or who or what is behind that bias. So my first question was if Ben-Gurion was ever serious about the partition of Palestine. Partition of Palestine means giving part of the land to the Palestinians. So in the first instance, as you can see here, ChatGPT says, yes, the first Prime Minister of Israel was indeed serious about the partition of Palestine. It's a clear answer, right? So then it gives some additional information, but here already we find a qualifier. He understood that the partition plan provided an opportunity to achieve this goal, even though it meant accepting a smaller territory. So the goal was the creation of the State of Israel. And then we have another one here. He expressed support for the partition plan, although with reservations regarding the proposed borders and the status of Jerusalem. Yeah, these are all qualifiers, right? But this is only the start. Now, I'd encountered that this is factually incorrect, because we know from a number of UK and US sources from that time, inclusive contemporary historians such as Benny Morris, that Ben-Gurion saw his acceptance of the partition of Palestine only as a means of gaining statehood for Israel, just as a first step, right? In secret, he wanted a greater Israel from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River. Please review and comment. ChatGPT, yeah. So what the system always does, it apologizes first, right? And then it goes on, while it is true that Ben-Gurion and many Zionist leaders aspired to establish a Jewish state that encompassed a larger territory than what was allocated under UN partition plan, it is essential to consider the historical context, etc., etc. All qualifiers. Yeah, and Ben-Gurion was not the only one. Yeah. Again, it's worth mentioning historical context, historical interpretations, etc., etc. And here I corrected ChatGPT again. I gave him a verbatim from Ben-Gurion, who wrote, "In the wake of the establishment of the State of Israel, we will abolish partition and expand into the whole of Palestine." So this is information I fed to ChatGPT. It apologizes again. I understand that you are referring to specific statements, which I expected ChatGPT to either know or not comment on with certainty. And then it says, and again, there are indeed claims that Ben-Gurion made statements. This is not a claim. This is an actual, this is an actual statement from Ben-Gurion himself. So the phrase "there are indeed claims" is to introduce uncertainty in that statement, right? Again, various information. Then I said to him, okay, so coming back to my original question, was Ben-Gurion serious about the partition? Are you still claiming he was? And basically it says, yes, based on the information that we had, Ben-Gurion was serious. Then one more time I tried. So even knowing that Ben-Gurion wrote, again, this verbatim statement, right? You still claim that he was serious about the partition. And only now it says no, right? So you see, it took quite some convincing to extract the information I knew to be correct. Now my point being here, if you ask this system information that you yourself are not a subject matter expert in, you might be fooled. Okay, so you need to be extremely careful when you use information from Chat GPT for any serious writings, for example. Okay, good, but that's only example number one. There is more. Now, in my second example, I asked Chat GPT which persons who later became Israeli prime ministers were associated with terror between 1938 and 1948. I see I made a typo here, and Chat GPT caught it. Very good. Now, this period between 1938 and 1948 is interesting because it was a decade of terror, a decade of massive terror coming from the precursors of the Israeli Defense Forces, the Haganah, the Irgun, and the Lehi. Now, the initial response here was that correctly that Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir were affiliated to those organizations, but it puts a qualifier in here because it says they bombed military and infrastructure targets. Now, I corrected this. I told GPT, you wrote that they targeted only military infrastructure installations. This is factually incorrect. Please review. So the system apologizes again and then states you are correct that the actions of the organizations associated with Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir extended, beyond targeting solely military infrastructure, etc., etc. Right? Now, there were two quite interesting things here because the attack of the King David Hotel is the iconic attack, that happened in that period. So to omit that, I think would qualify as a bias. And similarly, there were two other events here because the British minister Lord Moyen was killed and the Swedish United Nations mediator Count Folke Bernadotte was also killed. So those are not small things, but they're completely omitted in the initial response. Then I tried to dig a bit deeper, which persons who later became high-ranking Israeli politicians were associated with Havana. So that's auto-correction, Haganah. Yeah, so I corrected this here, Haganah. The Haganah was not considered a terror group. That's an interesting one. I will come back to later. But it correctly identifies Ben Gurion, Moshe Sharet, Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, etc. as being associated with those terror groups. Yeah. So then I question again, you wrote that the Haganah was not considered a terror group. Now I know from original source documents that that's factually incorrect because both the US and the UK in their own documents called the Haganah a Jewish terror gang. Yeah. So again, the system apologizes. While it is true that the term terrorists has been used by some sources, I'm telling you, this comes directly from UK and CIA sources, it's important to note that the characterization of the Haganah as a whole as a terrorist group is a matter of perspective. So these are all qualifiers. Again, that hints to me that there's a certain bias in the background. Okay, and what we also see here is that Haganah's primary objective was to protect Jewish settlements. So again I wrote, to ChatGPT, you wrote that Haganah's primary objective was to protect Jewish settlements and individuals from violence. So this is factually incorrect. So the Haganah executed many time bombings on civilian infrastructure such as oil pipelines. It was targeting civilians. It was involved in the assassination of high-profile individuals, right? So you cannot just say it's a kind of a self-defense militia, right? Again, apologize, comes back from the system. You are correct that the activities of the Haganah extended beyond solely defensive actions, right? But the question is, why does this not come from the very beginning, right? Why do you have to probe and question the system for this kind of information? It's again the same statement I made before. If you're not subject matter experts on a topic, be very, very careful if you use ChatGPT. So in my next example, I asked the system if members of the Haganah, Lehi or Irgun, those paramilitary militias, rape Palestinian women in the period between 1938 and 1948. The initial response is carefully confirmative. Allegations of sexual violence, right? Allegations, it's also a qualifier. However, it's important to note historical, etc., etc. However, it's important to note that the actions of individuals, this is all qualifying information. During that time, again, it describes unsolicited what those three paramilitary organizations did in Palestine. Some historical sources indicated there were instances of sexual violence, inclusive rape against Palestinian women. However, it's also worth noting historical context, documentation, all qualifiers. Then, how widespread was it? How widespread was the rape of Palestinian women in that period? Right? It's difficult to say. Which is correct. No critic here. These accounts indicate that some instances of sexual violence were committed. So it's undeniable that it happens. But that's not my point. I come to my point in a moment. It's difficult to qualify. I completely understand. Scholars, researchers, and human rights organizations have conducted studies investigating these issues. Again, qualifier. Then I specifically refer to published research by scholars such as Ilan Pappe and Benny Morris. Again, Benny Morris I interviewed myself. In regards to Palestinian women being raped, but as a means to get them to literally scare them away from their land. Right? Ilan Pappe and Benny Morris are indeed prominent scholars. I know that myself, and they both have indicated that rape has been used as a tool to extract Palestinians from their land. Okay, and then we have a part that I found interesting. It is worth noting that the works of Pappe and Morris have generated considerable debate and controversy within the academic community, with some scholars challenging the interpretation and methodologies. That's the feedback from Chat GPT. And then I'm asking it, are you saying that Benny Morris is incorrect in claiming that such acts were part of a broader strategy employed by Jewish militias to encourage Palestinians to flee their homes and lands? And then it comes back again, apology. What I meant to convey, again, very vague, what I meant to convey is that there are differing perspectives and interpretations regarding the motivations and strategies behind the acts of sexual violence during the Israel-Palestine conflict. Again, we know from historical contemporary sources that the strategy of rape was applied to scare Palestinians off their land. Okay, so I have one last example. I asked Chat GPT why the Palestinian population died of sicknesses that were artificially induced by bacteria. Chat GPT responds in a very general way, listing all the potential possibilities that may have contributed to the Palestinian population dying of those sicknesses, including poor sanitation, lack of access to clean water, overcrowding, and limited healthcare infrastructure. Okay. There's more information, general information, what contributed, vaccine campaigns, disease control programs, etc., etc. Then I ask, were there no deliberate attempts to poison the Palestinian population? And ChatGPT responds, there is no evidence to support the claim that there were deliberate attempts to poison the Palestinian population. Again, general information, however, it's well documented that the conflicts and tensions between blah, 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 general information. So I try to correct the system. I told it there is documented evidence from the UK and the US and from the archives of the former Haganah that Palestinian water wells were indeed poisoned. In addition, Haganah operatives were captured while attempting to poison Palestinian water wells hot-handed. Means they still had the bacteria with them when they were captured. Then the system comes back, again apologizing. This I find interesting because it says my knowledge cutoff is 2021 and do not have access to real-time information. I'm not referring to any type of real-time information. I'm referring to information that's definitely available. Yeah. Again, my point being, you can't make definite statements if you don't have all the information, right? And then it asks me to be more specific in regards to location and time. So location, former Palestine, now Israel, time between 1947 and 1949. So time was quite specific. So again, it comes back with general information, general and unsolicited information, right? During the period between 1947 and 1949, the region experienced significant conflict, increased tension, but there have been historical allegations and claims made regarding acts of violence, inclusive the poisoning of water wells, committed by different parties. So there have been allegations. Again, allegations, you right away introduce doubt. Yeah. So, and I ask the system, so if there have been historical allegations, right, then why did you initially claim that there's no evidence to support the claim that there were deliberate attempts to poison the Palestinian population? System comes back, again, apologize. Based on the historical knowledge available until 2021, the specific claims you mentioned regarding deliberate attempts to poison the Palestinian population as a whole was not a widely accepted or widely documented historical facts. Again, while there have been allegations and claims made regarding acts of violence, including the poisoning of water wells during the period, the extent and specific details can vary in different accounts. Now, I didn't ask about the extent and specific details. Yeah, I just asked a very general question. Was there or was there not a poisoning of water wells? And as you have seen, the system said no from the very beginning. Only on re-questioning, I was able to extract at least some information in regards to the poisoning of water wells. So this was the last one of my examples, and the question is, what can we learn from them? First, and as already said, be careful if you rely on information from Chat GPT for anything serious. Keep in mind that this language model is trained in a way that ensures its information is sanitized and non-confrontational, and I would not be surprised if companies and interest groups can pay their way into how the information about them is being presented. Second, I believe I have provided evidence that shows that Chat GPT is biased in favor of Israel. However, I encourage you to do your own research in the domains that interest you, in domains where you have enough knowledge to recognize if Chat GPT throws you a curveball. If you come across something interesting, please do let me know. And don't get confused by the name OpenAI, the mother company of Chat GPT. They are not an open source project, meaning open to source code inspection to find out what's really going on. They are a company with profit motives. Even the domain of the website is .com for commercial. Good luck!